we made a different decision. And that decision was the creation of AGRA, because it was our belief that for long-term change to really occur, that the institution needed to be located outside of us on the continent, working directly with governments and farmers here on the continent. And so that's an example specifically of how we think about, we do mean it when we say these efforts need to be country-led, they need to be led on the continent, and we want to support that in the work that we do.
Looking perhaps from a more high level overall, if I could come to the president of IFAD, what are you seeing in terms of real and effective change on the ground as a result of policy changing, as a result of AGRA, the work that AGRA is doing, etc.? How is that translating on the ground that you can actually see and measure now?
Thank you very much. The changes that I'm beginning to see on the African continent is one that one has to put in the perspective of how real partnership operates. I think at the center of this partnership is the government itself. So without a government that creates the environment to attract other development partners, you cannot have true partnership. And I see this occurring in many countries. I mean, within the last 6 weeks, I have seen it out in the field in Rwanda, in Zambia, in South Africa, and here a couple of days ago in Ghana. And I've seen it in other parts of the world. I think the core of all of this is that the partners are beginning to realize the synergies that occur when they work in concert, working through governments, working within government strategies and policies and priorities, and identifying where we can add value to that process. And this, for me, is the foundation for actually what we're talking about today, a real evergreen African Green Revolution that is in its works. I see in this case where development partners are putting into practice the Paris Declaration, the Accra Agenda. I see NEPAD beginning to transform itself, as the Chief Executive mentioned earlier this morning. I see them moving full force supporting the regional economic entities. So what we see here is governments recognizing the importance of agriculture as the backbone to economic growth, investing the political will on a long-term basis, and partners coming in, development partners coming in and getting involved in a long-term investment plan for agriculture. You want to go beyond agricultural development plans, because when you draw up an agricultural development plan, you're expecting somebody else to do it for you. When you transform those development plans into agricultural investment plans, you are inviting somebody to invest in a potentially successful story. My institution, IFAD, invests into agriculture, strategies and priorities of governments, and help to drive the process. And of course, at the center of all of this is something that you know I'm very passionate about: the smallholder farmer, and particularly women farmers. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I think we're all going to get very excited talking about women farmers. So we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But perhaps if we can deal with the question of Africa being able to feed the world. It's something that was said in a couple of the addresses this morning. Everybody alludes to it. Yes, we could do it. Of course we can. Of course we can. But let's talk about the reality of that. Can Africa really feed itself when we're sitting with 300 million people going to bed hungry? How are we going to feed the world if we're having such real issues feeding ourselves? I'd like to begin with you, and then perhaps if I could have the Prime Minister and the Vice President also address that question. The answer is yes. The question is when. But we have started. You know, when you actually look at the potential that this continent offers, you know, today with climate change and all the problems we have, Africa possesses 60% of the agricultural land that is available worldwide. That's number one. Number two, Africa has not even optimized the use of fertilizers. Average of, 8 kilograms per hectare compared to 150 kilograms elsewhere. Africa has not optimized its water resources. Less than 5% of our agricultural land is irrigated. Now, if you ask me whether these are challenges, I will say no, they are opportunities.
But those opportunities
yes,
have existed for some time.
And to tell you this, the smallholder farmer in Africa numbers anything from about 35 to 40 million on the continent. They produce 80% of all the food consumed on the continent. 80%. I saw just 2 days ago in eastern Ghana, farmers working together as organizations, transforming cassava, and this small company is exporting finished processed gari to where? To the Gambia. 400 tons a year. Producing gari in Ghana and exporting it to Gambia, not to London. What I'm saying here is that the potential for Africa to feed itself is never greater today than it ever was. It could be. We are at the brink of a transformational change in our agricultural systems because the potential to maximize and optimize our resources there, and to top it up, as was mentioned earlier, governments are beginning to invest the political will to give agriculture the priority of priorities in their development agenda.
That's a great segue, because I can have the Prime Minister perhaps address the issue of making that idea a reality. We can commit, we can sign the document, we can sign on the dotted line, we can tell everybody about it. But that actually happening on the ground is very often the challenge. The land has been there forever. You know, the possibility for us to maximize the land and get the yields out of it has been there. But us doing that seems to have remained elusive, maybe until now?
Well, I'm born from a very poor family in the first place. So when we talk about agriculture, sometimes I have a very special touch for it. Okay? I very strongly believe we can move from where we are to even much higher stages in terms of developing agriculture in our rural setup. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when I look back at what I was doing when I was taking part in the farming with my parents, and then today as a Prime Minister, when I go through and see what's happening in the rural area, I can see there is a complete change, a big change, particularly in the last few 2, 3, 4 years. Land is available, and good arable land. We have the people, we have the masses around us, people who are capable of working. Now, what is lacking, in my very simple understanding, are technologies. Okay? The use of inputs, fertilizers, and good seeds, which is still lacking tremendously in most of the African countries, Tanzania inclusive. Secondly, the land that has been allocated to the farmers also needs to be critically looked into if they really want to maximize on that land. And in my view, what we need is to strengthen the research centers so that farmers are capable of being told what type of soil they have, what they need in terms of the use of fertilizers, and what sort of seeds are needed in that particular area. Most of these research centers, well, maybe not in all parts of Africa, but at least for Tanzania, as I made reference to, they've almost collapsed. It's just now that we are trying to revamp them. So it's another area that we have to look into if we really want to make progress on this one. But yet, there are other areas which I've just discovered. You see, when we started the Agriculture First initiative in 2009, we came up with all these good things together, trying to see inputs, providing these inputs to farmers, see if we can mechanize, see if you can do A, B, C, D. The first year, this is the reference that Brother Kofi Annan made reference to. We made huge production.